is Madison and this is my senior project. Okay, so I decided to do my senior project on learning basic skills of cooking and baking. So my first slide. So this is my mentor, Cindy Braithwaite, and she, the very first day we decided to do breads, and we did two different kinds of breads. This one is an enriched dough, and this one is just a regular dough. And the difference between the two is an enriched dough has like butter and all the things that make it taste better, and it has a bunch of other ingredients, and then the other one's just very basic. And something I learned about the bread that I didn't know is it depends on the weather outside whether your bread is going to rise properly or not. So it can depend on the weather, which I thought was really interesting. This slide is of me kneading the dough. This took way more effort than I thought it was going to take because it requires a lot of upper body strength, and I lack that. And it was kind of cool to learn how to do it all by hand, just in case you don't have a mixer or something that can do it for you. So that was a good thing to learn. And then after we kneaded it, we put it in a bowl and let it rise until it was double its size. And then after that, we put them on baking sheets, and I rolled them into little balls and lined them up so that they wouldn't bake into each other. I made sure there was enough space in between. And we let them rise again. We put saran wrap over them and let them rise to double in size. I also didn't know that you had to let them rise 2 times. In this next part, we decided to do loaves of bread because I wanted to learn how to do that just in case there was a time where I wasn't able to go out and buy loaves of bread. And so she taught me a pretty interesting way of doing it. You basically rolled out the dough, and then you rolled it up like a cinnamon roll and shaped it into a loaf shape. And then you put it in the pan, and when it bakes and you cut into it, there's kind of like a swirl of bubbles, and it just makes it a lot more flattering and a lot more even. This is the final product. Some of these we accidentally left into the oven too long, so they got a little bit burnt, but the rest of them turned out really golden, and they tasted really good, and you could definitely taste the difference in between the enriched bread and just the regular bread. The enriched bread had a lot more flavor and was a lot more enjoyable to eat. The next day, we decided to do kind of an oriental day, and so we decided to do 3 things, which was lo mein, stir fry, and fried rice. So the very first thing that we did was we cut a bunch of fresh veggies up, and I learned a lot of cutting tricks with this, which will be really handy. I learned how to julienne and dice and cube and do all the different cutting styles that can make a dish really flattering and nice to look at. So we cut up a bunch of different vegetables, and then she taught me that you could use store-bought noodles and just simply cook them. And then we added the cut veggies into the noodles and stirred them up, and then we made a really yummy like sauce to go over it, and it had like soy sauce and vinegar and just made all the flavors kind of pop out. And then we squeezed some lime on top to make it taste even better. Then next we did fried rice, which was probably the hardest because it required so much cutting still. We had to cut a bunch of ham up and vegetables, and luckily we used the vegetables that we had cut beforehand, so we kind of added those in, but you had to cook the rice separately, and then we made the exact same sauce that we put on the lo mein before and just brought out those flavors a little bit more. And then again we added some lime on top. And those are the 2 finished products side by side. So this is the lo mein with the noodles, and this is the fried rice. They turned out really good, and they are super flavorful and also really pretty to look at. And the next thing we made was stir fry. And this one was the way easier dish because we decided to go the easier route with it since we had cut a bunch of veggies prior. We just decided to get a frozen bag of vegetables from Winco and basically thaw it out and add it into some marinated chicken that we had cut and marinated beforehand. And we just cooked all that into a pan. And then we just cooked some rice and put it on top. And then we also made the sauce again and just poured that on top, and it made it really good and just brought out all the flavors, and it was a really fun day. And then the next thing we learned how to do was chicken noodle soup from scratch. And this one was probably one of my favorites because it just required a bunch of different skills and they were all really fun. So the very first thing that we did was we made like a broth, and we did this by just adding different ingredients together and just boiling them on the stove. And then the next part that we did was we made our own noodles, which was really fun. I actually didn't even know you could make your own noodles. But we did this by getting a mound of flour, and then you dug a hole in the middle and cracked some eggs into it, and then you mixed it all together. And that turned into kind of a dough. And I didn't know you could make dough that easily. It literally was just 2 ingredients, and you mix that into a dough, you kneaded it a little bit, and then you cut it into strips, and then they turn out like these noodles. And something I didn't know was that bread and biscuits and those types of things have gluten strands in them. And these love to have gluten strands, so it loved to be played with and kneaded a lot. And it was really sticky, and they like to stick to each other, so you needed to learn. You needed to use a lot of cornstarch. So this is the finished product of the chicken noodle soup. There's all my homemade noodles and the broth, and we added some vegetables in there too that were just frozen from the Winco aisle. And over here we made biscuits too because I didn't know how to make biscuits. And those I learned hate to have gluten strands, and the less of them the better they turn out. So you really don't want to play with biscuit dough a lot, so they turn out really flaky and delicious, and they turned out really well, and these two tasted really good together. The last day we decided to do desserts, and we originally started off with just wanting to make 2 desserts, but we figured out that we would just have a lot of leftover ingredients, so we were thinking we were just going to make 3 instead. So the very first thing that we did was we made a peanut butter pie, and we did this by crushing Oreos for the crust and lining it into a pan. And then we made a cream cheese filling and crumpled the top with Reese's, and it turned out really nice and was good. And then the last 2 cakes that we made 2 cakes. The first one being an orange chiffon cake, which was one of the easier of the 2. And cakes, I learned that you have to level them out really evenly and make sure all the ingredients are exact. And then the last cake we made was an angel food cake, which is probably one of the most difficult cakes to make because of our elevation in Idaho. Where we live, it's really easy for the angel food cake to fall while it's in the oven because our elevation is so high. And unfortunately it did fall a little bit, but it still turned out really great and super delicious. And the angel food cake came out almost like a chewy consistency, which is really different than any other cake I've had, and it was really good. And then we made a lemon sauce. It was a lemon curd to put over the cakes to just bring a little bit more flavor and moisture back into them. And that was really easy. It was super fun. We drizzled them over the cakes, and they tasted really delicious. And yeah, that was the end of my project. Are there any questions?
What do you think your best one was? Like if you had to make one of those things, someone really important, if the president was coming over and you had to make one of those things.
I would probably make...
What would you make?
I'd probably make one of the Oriental dishes because there's so much flavor in them and they taste really good, and even though it's really hard to make it, you're able to make it look really pretty and presentable, and I would probably choose that one. But yeah.
You were talking a lot about like gluten strands. What makes those? Like just the kneading?
Yeah. The more you knead, the more gluten strands there is. So bread likes to have gluten strands, but something like biscuits where you want them to be really flaky and kind of crumbly, you don't want any gluten strands in them. So the less you knead them, the better they'll turn out. Yeah.
Okay. How long did this take?
This took probably 15 to 20 hours. This project took 15 to 20 hours probably. Yeah.
So your bread doughs, when you say you had to let them rise twice, you let them rise the first time before you shape them and the second time after you shape them?
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyways, that's all the time I have. So thank you for your questions, and thank you.